Indeed, it's a pleasure and a privilege to welcome Dr. Shahid Jameel for this afternoon session. Just a brief introduction about Dr. Shahid Jameel. He is currently the Chief Executive Officer of the Wellcome Trust DBT India Alliance. He has been holding this position since 2013. Incidentally, Dr. Jameel did his master's chemistry from IIT Kanpur, so it is, it's again is a very great, it's a kind of a privilege again to have him back here in the campus. And his PhD was from Washington University and postdoctoral work in the University of Colorado Medical Center. So prior to assuming the CEO position at this India Alliance, Dr. Jameel was a group leader at the International Center for Genetic Engineering Biotechnology. It's an institute, for those who are not aware, in Delhi, funded later part of its existence, funded by the DBT, where he served for nearly 25 years, and his research focused on virus and especially the HIV kind of infection and so on. He's a prolific researcher. He did some of the pioneering work in from the ICGB, and he has been awarded with several recognitions and award, including the Shanta Sri Swarup Bhatnagar Award. He is also a fellow of all the science academies in India, and currently he is overseeing the activities of the India Alliance, which is one of the larger funding body in biomedical research, and is very professionally run and has really changed the way the landscape of biomedical research in the country. And indeed, it's a great pleasure to host him for the talk today. Hi.
Good afternoon. Am I audible at the back? Okay, great to be back at IITK. I think the trips have to be a little more frequent. Coming after 4 years, I really spent 2 of the best years of my life on this campus. I can increase the volume. Audible now? Okay. Yeah, so I really spent 2 fantastic years on this campus, except that there was no biology at that time. So those of us who were more biologically inclined had a tough time. But it was fun. It was really fun. I lived in Hall 5. I don't know, most of you are from places other than IIT Kanpur. So I don't know if you've taken a stroll on campus or not. I lived in Hall 5, just across from the tennis courts. And the tennis court was my second home. So it was great. I was looking at some papers the other day, and I had forgotten that for 2 years in a row, the 2 years that I was here, the PGs won the inter-hall tennis tournament. So that was good. So yeah, it's great to be back. And this is not really the best time to hear a lecture after a good meal. I was at the guest house having lunch, and it was a good lunch. So I'll try to keep you entertained, but even if you doze off, you're not going to miss much. All right, so I'm not going to talk any biology here. As you can see from the title of my talk, is fairly general. I will talk about academic research and institutions of higher learning, and of course, their governance, leadership, management structures. Of course, these are all my views. Some of you may differ in your opinion, but that's fine. I hold my view and you can hold yours. All right. All right. So I'm going to divide my talk today in three broad categories. First, to talk about what is a university and what are the challenges that face universities today. I believe most of you come from institutions of higher learning, maybe if not universities, but institutes or technology institutes or otherwise, which are as good as universities. And what are the sort of challenges that face these organizations today? I will then switch and talk about leadership a bit. And these themes are all connected, which hopefully you will see as I go along. And I will talk about research management structures. I mean, most of you, I think, come from organizations that do research. And the question that you need to ask yourselves, are you poised to really attract the kind of attention that you should be attracting from funding agencies, from collaborators, the research ecosystem, and if not, what might be lacking? And mostly what is lacking is a good management structure in research organizations. So hopefully, as I go along, I will connect these three threads. And as you will notice, I have some pictures that define these threads. Of course, the first picture is the iconic building from Oxford University. So that kind of defines a university for me. The second, I'm sure you recognize this very unusual picture of Mahatma Gandhi, who I think was a fantastic leader. This picture was taken at a very unusual place, and I don't know how many of you recognize the background. That's the Bay Bridge in San Francisco. And I found a statue of Mahatma Gandhi there, so I thought that would make a good frame to have a leader and a bridge. Leaders do bridge gaps, so that's the significance of that picture. And the world map for research management really signifies the global importance of research management. So let me start by asking, what is a university? And these are two definitions of universities that I came across. They're a bit long to read, but we are in no hurry. So this is something that Jawaharlal Nehru said very early in the life of our republic. And he said that a university stands for humanism, for tolerance, for reason, for progress, for the adventure of ideas, and for the search of truth. It stands for the onward march of the human race towards even higher objectives. A vast responsibility rests on our universities and educational institutions and those who guide their destinies. You are the people who guide destinies for your universities today. Pretty lofty goals. In today's day and age, if you read back at this, it's pretty scary. Are we really living up to these ideals or not? And if not, why not? The other definition is from a recent book by Pankaj Chandra. It's a book called Building Universities That Matter. And to give you a background, Pankaj Chandra was a faculty member at IIM Ahmedabad. He became the director of IIM Bangalore. Almost became the chairman of UGC. And then now he is the president of, I believe, Ahmedabad University, which is a private university in Ahmedabad. A thinker who thinks very deeply about universities, about higher education.
What is that
And
almost?
I was asked to provide.
Sorry, what is that almost?
Pardon me?
You said
Almost UGC.
almost to cover the UGC.
He's saying almost chairman UGC. Why you use that word almost?
Because somebody else became the chairman.
He wants to know the story behind.
He was, I'm told he was on the panel to become the chairman of UGC, and this I heard from the horse's mouth, one of the members of the search committee, and he said that the advice he gave to the appointing authority was, if you want to bring a drastic change in higher education in the country, appoint Pankaj Chandra. If you want things to continue as usual, appoint somebody else. Somebody else was appointed. So anyway, this book has influenced me deeply, and if there is one reading material that you people should be reading, it is this book. Highly recommended. It's very readable. And it's not very expensive, about 500-600 rupees. Please do read it. And what Pankaj Chandra says is that universities are places of social development that inspire and provoke, question and answer, build beliefs and destroy myths, that delve into the depths of the past and rise into the heights of the future. So again, a very altruistic definition of a university, but it's good to have these things in mind when you are in higher education institutions. Okay, so what is the purpose of education? Well, a very narrow definition of education is something you get to get employment. But is that really the goal of education? Education really is both a private and a public good. It's a private good because it offers people the opportunity to get employed, to make a living. It improves them as individuals. But it's also a public good because it provides the state with enlightened citizens. It provides the state with taxes that come through employment and entrepreneurship and innovation that these people do. So, and in general, produce more enlightened citizens who do well for the country. So education is both a private good and a public good. There's a famous saying by one of the former presidents of Harvard University. His name was Derek Walk. And he said that if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. There is a lot in that saying. So education really builds a nation. Education builds an individual. It is often considered that when India liberalized its economy, liberalization would work if government processes are in place and market forces will guide it. Unfortunately, that's not true. Because markets require innovation. Markets just don't run by themselves. They require innovation, and innovation requires an education. Governments also require not just processes, but government requires citizens who can build social values around the processes that government sets up. And these social values are really built through education. So the question I'm asking is, are we effectively doing that? Are we effectively innovating? Are we effectively building social values? Unfortunately, the answer is in the negative for both of these. Universities have become degree granting institutions. Knowledge and innovation takes a back seat. In terms of innovation, people have various metrics for measuring innovation. Patents is one way to measure innovation. How many patents are being filed by a university, by a country, by an individual, and so on and so forth. Consider this. In 2016, India filed only 5% of patents that China filed in the same year. Okay, we like to compare ourselves to China for many things. We think that we are competitors of China in Asia. I'm sorry, but that's not a factual situation. Okay, so that's just by way of one example of innovation. How about social values? Are we building good social values? Is our education system building good social values? I mean, how many times have you seen somebody going in an expensive car, rolling the window down and throwing garbage out of the window? I'm sorry to be crude, but how many times have you seen people lining up against the wall and relieving themselves? Is that good social value? Is that good civic sense? So unfortunately, our education system hasn't really lived up to the high ideals that were thought of for our education system. We're not doing very well on social indicators, and we're not doing very well on innovation indicators. This is some data, and I'm trying to analyze why this has happened to universities. You know, people often ask, why did Indians working in India get the Nobel Prize in India that was a slave, and this has not happened in an India which is a free India. Some of it has to do with the education system. Look at these figures. In 1950-51, that year, India had 28 universities, 578 colleges, and only 4 lakh students in higher education. Over the next 60 plus years, 2012 to 13, we grew to 712 universities, more than 36,000 colleges, and about 300 lakh students. A growth of 75-fold in terms of the number of students. Has that growth matched the growth in the numbers of universities and colleges? It hasn't. So that's point number one. Point number two is that this growth has been extremely rapid. When you grow so rapidly, you hardly ever maintain quality. And that is precisely what has happened to our education system. UGC came into existence around 1952 or so.
56.
UGC was supposed to be an enabler of higher education. It became a controller of higher education. So there are multiple factors that led to compromise on quality. I mean, IITs were set up, 5 IITs set up, and for a long time, there was, IITs really were a benchmark for high quality education. And some of us are fortunate to have been to these places during that time. I wonder whether this brand name IITs, which is being diluted now with IITs being opened at every nook and corner, will do the same to that structure. Time will tell. But the important thing is, don't grow too fast. I mean, if you grow too fast in an education system, in a university, you are not able to maintain quality. And quality is the most important ingredient of higher education. Identify the right people who will bring the system to a level of excellence. Unfortunately, that has not happened. Inbreeding is something else that has happened at many of our higher education institutions. You hire your own people. Unfortunately, when you hire your own people, you don't hire your best. You hire your most obedient. And that causes a problem with the higher education system. What else has happened? the gross enrollment ratio of India is today about 25%. What this means is that 25% of 19 to 23-year-olds which is the college going age, what percent of 19 to 23-year-olds are in an institution of higher education? The number for India is around 25% right now. What does it mean? It means that if we were to aspire to send 50% of people who want to go to college, we need twice as many universities and colleges as we have today. So it's a complex problem. We have grown fast and that has compromised quality. But we need to grow faster to match the aspirations of a young, upwardly looking population. So these are the complexities of higher education in our country. These are the challenges that we face. Okay, so let me come to challenges. I think the first challenge for a university or a higher education institution is autonomy. Much has been said about autonomy lately. You would have read a lot in newspapers that UGC is going to be disbanded. Universities will have more autonomy. Will universities have more autonomy? And if so, what should that autonomy look like? So autonomy really calls for simplification of rules. Autonomy doesn't mean that you take the system from one controller to another controller. Autonomy should really simplify rules. It should also develop local models that work. Maybe something works better at IIT Kanpur which doesn't work well at IIT Bombay. And IIT Kanpur and IIT Bombay should both have the flexibility to do it accordingly. That's autonomy. Autonomy is not making sure that the Department of Mechanical Engineering in both these places should hire exactly similar people. That's not autonomy. So I think it's very important to understand that in higher education, you need variable input to get out a standard output. Unfortunately, in our education system, we have standard input which leads to variable outcomes. What is that standard input? You go through, if somebody applies for a position, your first worry is, if I don't shortlist according to the specified qualifications in the advertisement, there would be an RTI. Everyone is scared that there would be an RTI, and therefore you really don't look for the right people to hire. The second problem which happens is, you really don't see what the needs of a department are, the needs of a university are. There is some external committee which comes in, sits for a day and says he is good, he is good, he is not good. That external committee has no idea about the culture of your place. That committee has no idea about the needs of your place. They tell you who to hire. Because we have lost trust in our own system. And all this is because of mistrust. People don't trust each other. What happens in Western universities? How do they hire? Candidates come in, they interview extensively, they meet faculty, and then every faculty member gives input on these candidates. And in the end, the faculty sit and decide who should be their colleague. It is not a 2 or 3 member interview panel that decides who should be your colleague. Many good institutions in India do that. And they somehow get around the standard rules and do it. And that is how they are able to maintain quality. You should also have autonomy in courses, in hiring which I've just talked about, and also assessment. Who is the best judge of whether a young assistant professor is doing well or not? It's his or her colleagues. It's not again some committee that comes from outside who will determine whether you teach well or not, whether you are doing good research or not, whether you are a good citizen in the university atmosphere or not. A two-member committee cannot decide that. It is your colleagues who should decide. Unfortunately, very little of that happens in our universities, again because we don't have trust in each other. There is mistrust, and because of that, we outsource it to people from outside who will come and tell us who's good for us, who's doing good for us, and who's not doing good for us. So the point is that autonomy really talks about simplification of rules, and any body, whether it's UGC or Higher Education Commission of India or whoever it may be, if they really want to grant autonomy, they should stop regulating. They should enable universities to produce, good outputs. Instead of having standard output, standard input, variable output, it should be the other way around. Funds. Funds are very important for everything. Look at what we are spending. We are spending about $700 per student per year in higher education in India today. Compare that to a US university which spends about $12,000 per year per student. You will argue that, look at the fees of a US university. Yes, we hardly charge anything. I remember when I was a student at IIT Kanpur, 25 rupees was my room rent and the tuition fees. Of course, that was many moons ago. And I'm sure in our public universities, costs have gone up, but they've not gone up, comparable to Western universities. But in India, it's the taxpayer that is almost totally funding institutions of higher education, unless, of course, you are a private university. In US, for example, even a state university gets no more than about 25% of its total funding from the state. Rest of it they generate themselves. So the question is, how do you generate that money? Should all the funds to run a university come from the government, from the taxpayer? Or are there other potential sources of funding? My view on this is that the government should not fund 100%. The government should fund to a reasonable extent, but then free up institutions to generate their own funds. And if you free them up to generate their own funds, they would have to produce quality, otherwise nobody would give them the money. So it's a circle that you really get caught in, and all these things are linked. What might be the other sources of funding? Let me point out 2 or 3 sources which can be used. In India, we have corporate social responsibility, which is an act. Any company that is making upwards of 1,000 crores in a year has to give 2% towards corporate social responsibility. Where is this money going? It's going to build toilets. It's going to build primary education. Very useful, must go there. Most of the private money, 50% or above, goes into education. Almost none goes into higher education. Most of it goes into primary education, school education. Wealthy individuals build colleges and run these colleges for profit. That's the situation. So if university is a social organization, if there is a value for university in society by producing better citizens, as I was arguing earlier, by producing people who will innovate, then universities should also attract a share of corporate social responsibility. For that, universities will have to change their way of thinking and do things that require that will attract that kind of funding. The other very important source of funding, well, two other sources of funding, alumni. And IITs have really shown us a very good model how alumni can fund institutions. Walk around this campus and you will see buildings that have been built by alumni. Alumni networks have to be tapped. Some universities in India, some of the older universities in India, have upwards of 2 or 3 lakh living alumni at any given time. Even if everyone gives 10 rupees a month, figure out how much money that place can generate in a month, in a year. Okay, so that's the second one. The third important source, and this is something that a lot of people don't know, is private philanthropy. Private philanthropy has grown in India at a phenomenal pace in the last 5 or 6 years. In the last 5 years, private philanthropy has grown from about 6,000 crores annually to about 36,000 crores annually. Who are these people who are giving money? These are not your Narayan Murthy's and Kiran Majumdars or the Tatas. These are young guys who have made a lot of money very early in their life in the corporate world and who have a cause that is very dear to them, and they give money to that cause. Maybe their parent died of cancer or somebody in the family has diabetes. They are funding programs of research for many of these things. They are putting their money into educating the girl child. They are putting their money into tribal welfare. All kinds of things are happening in this country. Why aren't universities gearing up to get some of this money? Again, what it would require is good management structures. It would require a new way of thinking to attract this kind of funding. The third challenge which I feel universities face today is the nature of work is changing. The future of work is going to be very different from what you see today. There are estimates that by 2020, which is not very far, about 5 million people would lose their jobs to artificial intelligence, robotics, automation. These are of course global figures.
Is it for India only?
No, this is world
Global?
World over.
Global.
What are the kinds of jobs that will be lost to begin with? These are going to be single skill set jobs. A clerk in a legal office. You don't find clerks anymore doing railway bookings, right? That job has disappeared in our lifetime to automation. Single skill set jobs are going to be the first hit. Our universities are still training people to become secretaries in offices, legal clerks, this and that. The future is for cross-cutting training. Unfortunately, the degrees we give are not cross-cutting degrees. We give a BA, we give a BCom, we give a BSc. If somebody gets into, let's say, BA honors program in a university, they study only those 3 subjects. Honors program means in the final year they will only study that subject and have no other skills. The future is about other skills. And this would really require different models. So why can't somebody who does a BA degree take a management course? most universities don't even offer that flexibility. Some do, but most don't. You have to take certain number of courses. Those courses are defined by people who sit at the helm of affairs in universities. They tell you what's good for you, and they have designed it based on their experience, which is from 30 years ago. So these are the problems that universities are facing, these are the challenges, and they really need to calibrate themselves to do better in future. Look at funding of higher education in India compared to funding elsewhere. The orange bar shows, the blue bar shows government, orange shows industry, and grey shows other sources of funding. And this is for research and development, but it's pretty generic to what I'm saying. Research in India is supported, about 50% of it is supported by public money, by government. Look at the figure for every other country in the world. Mexico probably comes the closest with about 38-40% from government funding. Countries that we look up to, countries that we aspire to become, US, UK, even there's a China somewhere here. Look at the amount of government funding that goes into research, and look at the amount of industry funding that goes into research in all of these countries that we aspire to be. So that's my point, that we really need to look at other models of funding, and whether you like it or not, the government is going to reduce its share of funding to R&D. This is very clear in the science and technology document, policy document that came out earlier this year. They recognize that India should be putting at least twice the amount of money in R&D that it's putting now. But in the next sentence, this document says, but that money should come from non-government sources. So this is happening. If you don't want to see it, you won't see it, but it's happening. And it will happen very, very soon. So we really need to gear up to take care of that. So universities, as I have been saying, prepare for the future. They prepare better citizens and provide innovation through the research that is done at universities and through the knowledge that is generated at universities. And therefore, my argument is that if the university is a social organization, it should also attract funds other than from taxes, from the taxpayer, from the government. And we all must collectively think about other models of funding, because if we don't, things are going to go from bad to worse. Okay, let me now switch to leadership. Why is leadership important? And this is a very interesting quote by Peter Drucker, who died a few years back. He was a big management guru. And he says that three things happen naturally in organizations: friction, confusion, and underperformance. Everything else requires leadership. And this is true. Leave a system to its own, it will decay much faster than it took time to build that system. Okay? And those of you who are in chemistry would understand this very well. The concept of entropy in chemistry, you understand this very well. So, good leadership is required for good management at institutions of higher learning, and good management will lead to better outcomes, it will lead to better funds. So all these things are interrelated. So what about academic governance? Because at the, yes?
I didn't get the Drucker's quote exactly. Doctor, I didn't quite get the quote. Peter Drucker's quote.
Yes.
Previous slide.
You want to see it again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably you elaborate.
I'll give my slide so you don't have to.
No, he wants elaboration.
Elaboration of, I mean,
Explanation.
can be more friction, confusion, and reform then.
Everything else on leadership.
Yeah. let's talk about governance, because at the core of leadership is governance. Good leaders provide good governance, bad leaders provide bad governance. There's a very direct correlation. Governance is all about debating and building consensus. And all good institutions do that. All good departments do that. And you will see that at some point there was this department that was doing very well. What was happening in that department? People were talking to each other. People were taking decisions collectively. And as soon as people started dividing themselves in silos, this governance model fails. So shared governance is really critical. And shared governance is not about majority or minority views. This is about what is right. This is about protecting shared beliefs and the process of decision making. Decisions are important, but the way these decisions are made are equally important. You may know that hiring this person is good. The leader should be able to take people along and convince them that hiring this person in your department would be good. Instead of saying, he's good because I say so. Okay, and it's also not right for faculty to come out and vote whether we should take this person as a faculty or not. I mean, you can't decide a faculty member by a 5:4 vote. This has to be about consensus building, about convincing each other that this person is good and this person may not be as good. Okay, so this is not about majority or minority views. This is about influencing decisions through intelligent and rational arguments. And this is what leaders do. You look at leaders in any setting, they will provide rational and intelligent arguments to further their beliefs. Only the weak ones will hide behind rules. Rules are important, but people who have nothing to convince you will throw rules at you. So always be aware of people who throw rules at you. Should the governance be hierarchical or flat? Flat governance is people collectively making decisions. Hierarchical is because I say so. How many times have you seen that the vice chancellor or the director of an institution suddenly becomes the wisest person on campus? You know, till yesterday he was a colleague and nobody paid attention to him, and today he's become a director or a head of the department or vice chancellor, and suddenly he's become the wisest person on campus. Everybody is running to him or her for ideas, and the poor guy doesn't have that many ideas. The trouble doesn't stop there. The trouble is that these people, once they get to these positions, start taking themselves too seriously. And they really think that they are the wisest people on campus. And that's where really things fall apart, because then they take these decisions that are not acceptable to others, but others keep quiet because it's the wisest person on campus who took this decision. So governance, flat governance is always better than hierarchy. Academic and executive councils in universities and are supposed to be providing these checks and balances. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. I have sat on the executive council of a large university, and the very first meeting I attended of the executive council, the matter that had come up for discussion was they had conducted an exam for medical entrance. There were some allegations that the paper may have been leaked. So the decision that was to be taken by the executive council was whether the exam should happen again or should we go ahead and declare the results. my first meeting, as a fool, I raised my hand and I said, before the meeting begins, can we identify people whose sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, any direct relation has taken that exam? And if that is the case, then that person should leave the room. Because you cannot be party to this decision. And unanimously everyone said, but why? This is how we've been doing things. Fortunately, the Vice Chancellor who was in the chair agreed with me and he said, he's right. This is a conflict of interest. If your ward has done well, you would not want the exam to be repeated. If your ward has not done well, you would want the exam to be repeated. Conflict of interest is such a simple thing which we don't understand in our academic settings. Go to your universities and see how many sons and daughters of faculty members are employed in your own department or in the university at large, and you will understand that. By the way, I come also from an academic family. My father was a professor, my grandfather was a professor. But I didn't stay at that university for very long. This is important. The other thing I've always wondered is, why is the Executive Council, which is supposed to be like a board for a corporation, chaired by the Vice Chancellor? The Vice Chancellor should be reporting to the Executive Council instead of the Vice Chancellor chairing the Executive Council. And the same directors chairing senates and So these checks and balances in our system seem to be a little loose.
Sir, who would chair it then? Who should chair it then?
What?
Who should chair it then?
There should be an
convener?
independent chair.
It should be a convener only?
There should be an independent chair.
Independent chair.
Look at what organizations do. They have a board with an independent chair. The CEO of the company or
Even in Senate you want that?
Huh?
Even in Senate you want the director should not chair?
Yeah.
In POG anyway he is not chair, but
I mean this. I know you may not agree with these, but
No, I'm not-
these are my observations. And
I'm just trying to understand your observation.
conflict of interest rules are so important and we don't follow them very well. Because see, eventually in our system, the behavior at the top percolates down. If behavior at the top is good, then you will have more consensus building in departments. You will have a good atmosphere in research labs. You will have a good atmosphere in administration offices and so on and so forth. But if there is hierarchy from the top, everyone keeps whipping the guy below him. There's this very interesting cartoon that shows two rows of birds, one sitting on wires, one above the other, and it says the people higher up only see shit when they look down, and the people below only see assholes when they look up. Sorry for the language, but it sort of signifies what's happening in higher education today because it is so hierarchical. And what this really leads to is personal agendas. People don't trust each other. There is petty competition. All of that is happening. Every institution has that. Walk into a professor's office in a state or central university, and I can guarantee you that the talk will be about people, not about ideas. And that says a lot about academia today. Okay, so governance has to do with leadership. And leadership is really key to managing an institution. And you really have to recognize the institution as an organization. And that's what I was saying earlier. when I was talking about this executive council and vice chancellors chairing it and all that. Institutions are very complex in their governance, and that is why we should very carefully see whether we are following a flat model of governance or a hierarchical model of governance. Participation is very important. What you really require in leaders, and this is not just academic leaders, any leaders, is clarity. They should have clarity of thought, and with clarity of thought comes the ability to make decisions that are right decisions. Those decisions do not depend upon a majority view. These decisions are dependent only with the purpose of improving learning opportunities for students. That's the end goal of any academic organization. All the stakeholders should really drive towards the central theme, and that central theme is, are we improving learning experience for the students who are attending this? Every action of an administrator, a teacher in an academic environment should really be guided by this question: am I improving the learning opportunity? Also, academic leaders need courage not to, fight somebody or, muscle their way through, but courage to push their ideas and beliefs. And again, this is not about majority view. You have a view, you think it's right, convince other people through intelligent and rational arguments that what you are saying is right. That is leadership. Okay, so let me come to the other part, which is about research management. And it is here where I will say a little bit also about an initiative that we have started on research management. So the world of research today is really changing. It's changing because it's internationally extremely competitive. Money is in short supply. Funding priorities are changing. There are challenges that people face for getting money to do research and to secure positions to do research, to manage everything. Okay? Environment is rather challenging right now. Also with international collaborations. Today you pick up any paper in a mainstream science journal and you will see the number of collaborators who are on that paper. The kinds of technology that people are using to do one piece of work. And obviously, one person cannot be conversant with all the technologies, so collaborations are important. So that's another challenge that people face today. Ethics continues to be a challenge. Almost no institution formally teaches ethics to people who want to go into research. Team science, again, collaboration, new scientific opportunities are coming up, which are also posing a significant burden on researchers. Should researchers be running from one office to the other to get the file cleared for buying an equipment? It happens at most institutions. You bring the money and you then run around to spend that money. That's hampering research. Of course, measuring the impact of research is again very challenging. You've done a piece of work, how do you know it will make any impact? And that's again a fairly special field. Today, Government of India spends about 0.8% of GDP on research. And as I was mentioning earlier, the government itself says that more funding should be there in the system, but then this funding should come from non-government sources. So again, to generate funding from non-government sources, you will need proper structures. Philanthropists will not give you money just because they like your face. They will require certain structures to be in place, certain impact modeling to have been done. they will look at what you've done in the past. Even big international funders will see a lot of these things before they invest money into you or your organization. So what is research management? Research management is everything except conducting research in the lab. Everything that goes around it. This is about building partnerships, whether it's corporate partnerships or partnerships with another academic center. It's about facilitating these collaborations. It's about finding opportunities. Somebody has to keep track of what funding opportunities are available, let's say in drug development or on malaria research. Somebody has to keep track. Today, a researcher has to keep track of everything. And it really becomes very, very challenging. Somebody has to put together the contracts and agreements. I mean, I remember the first time I applied for an NIH grant. NIH, those of you who are not in life sciences, is the National Institutes of Health, which is the largest funding body in US, and it funds research worldwide. So the first time I applied for NIH grant, the amount of paperwork was amazing. I mean, we crib about DBT and DST, amazing amount of paperwork, and there was nobody at my institution who had ever done it. So it took me a lot of time to understand this and to do it. After I left the institution, that memory went away with me. There should have actually been somebody at the institution who, in the research office of the institution, who should have done it. And there would have been a memory and a continuity. Hardly happens. Researcher does it, after the researcher is gone, it's over. Reinvent the wheel again. Post-award management of grants. I mean, those of you who are our fellows would realize how much it requires, how much work it requires post-award. Program management is complex. Again, research policy, research impact, public engagement, all of this can be done by people who are trained in these domains, people who can populate the research office at an institution. Networks are important. Networks are being built right now, and not surprisingly, there is a research management network also which is available. India is very nascent to this network, but we are getting there. So there are countrywide associations. So for example, there's an association in Australia, there is one, I believe in South Africa somewhere, there's one in UK. Many countries have these associations.
Can we also be, attached to these
Pardon me?
networks? Can
we
we
be
attach to these
members?
networks? I mean, if I want to be entering into this network, can I do that, or say
Sorry, I'm not.
He is asking, can we be member of this?
Oh, can you be members of this? I'm coming to that.
Okay.
You're jumping a little ahead of me.
Okay, sorry.
I'll come to that.
Okay.
So through this, there are training and network opportunities. Some of these associations publish newsletters. There are even journals for research management that are out now. And it provides recognition to people who are research managers at institutions. So all that is happening. India is new to it, but India is getting into it. And this is where I wanted to bring in what we do. The Wellcome Trust DBT India Alliance is a partnership between Wellcome Trust, which is a British charity, and Government of India through its Department of Biotechnology. And we provide funding to researchers in biomedical research. Our history over the last 10 years is that by now we have given, actually this slide is a little older, so I can now say that we have about 348 awards in 10 years at about 100 institutions in India. So we have a fair breadth. We did an anonymous survey of our fellows at the fellows meeting last year. And this is what our fellows told us about their institutions. Only about 35 or 38% institutions provide any laboratory management support to people. Very few provide any data management support. Research misconduct, a lot of institutions have a policy, and also institutions follow that policy reasonably well. Tech transfer also, there is support available. But when we ask how many of your institutions have research development offices, you can see that only about 15 or 18% institutions. And these are, very good institutions that have people who are highly competitive. And even then you find that research development offices are very rare in these institutions. So what did we do with this data? So what we did with this data and a few other things is to set up something called the India Research Management Initiative, or IRMI. And this really came out because in 2016 the Wellcome Trust out of UK did a scoping exercise and tried to find out what is required for research management in places where they put their money, India, Africa, Southeast Asia. What is required in these countries? We did a couple of other things, and along with the findings from our fellows, we set up this research management initiative, which was launched in February this year. We have launched it as a one-year pilot phase. So this pilot is going to end this month, but it's essentially done quite well. What it has done is that it has brought us into dialogue with many research institutions. It has raised awareness about research management practices, and it has identified gaps in research management that is present at these institutions. This is just a picture of one of the meetings that was held somewhere in UK. I think it was from this meeting, which brought together Indian and African program people. So this framework really provides leadership support for research management at senior levels. It also provides a sustainable research management function in India through workshops, through discussions, through shared knowledge. It is going to set standards and practices and contribute to capacity building, because in the end, really raising awareness and conversations with stakeholders is very important for any research network. So our approach has been that we ask institutions to register on this network, and there's no fee to register, it's free registration. We do outreach through site visits, workshops, panel discussions. We provide networking opportunities to research managers from different institutions through workshops. Also provide an international perspective. This year we sent 6 research managers from different institutions that have developed research offices to an international meeting of research managers which was held in Edinburgh. And that was a big learning experience from them. And now India is getting integrated into all these international networks. We have a feedback form where people can tell us what the needs are, what's missing. So basically it's all about conversations between these stakeholders. This is one example of a sharing workshop which was done at ICER Pune. We've had 3 such workshops, one in Bangalore, one in Pune, and one in Delhi, which involved small group discussions, both for institutional leaders as well as for research managers. They explored the benefits of research management, what are the barriers, what are they expected to do in future in terms of guiding policy, and we also talk about our own funding policy. Of course, we are funding this initiative, so it helps us also. I mean, one can ask, why are you funding it? It helps us tremendously, because if institutions have well-developed research management offices, people sitting in our office don't have to go back and forth with the award documents and reporting financial matters and everything else. So it saves us time. In terms of engagement, we do occasionally engage in bursts. So for example, there was September 25th was Research Managers Day. There's actually a day called Research Managers Day. And there was a lot of Twitter discussion that happened on that day on the benefits of research management and what everyone should be doing. We have this little form, Google form, which is there on our site, and anybody can go and enter on that what they think research management should do. And this builds our ideas database. And we have a page on LinkedIn as well to propagate this. This is the group that went to the INORMS conference in Edinburgh. So this was the first ever Indian delegation that had gone to the Research Managers Conference. And we hope that in future there would be many more who would join. So till the middle of November, we have 31 organizations who have registered on the IRMI network. And you will see that there's only one university. But there are, DBT, MHRD institutions, private institutions are actually coming forth much more than public institutions. And you can understand the reasons why. Private institutions have to find sources of money. Public institutions are in this mode that the government will fund me perpetually. So what are the key learnings that we have from this? We have learned that most institutions provide researchers with financial management and post-award management of grants. So there is somebody in the office who will do the balance sheet for the grant, but will do little more than that. They will also regulate, when you start buying equipment or chemicals and things like that. And also most institutions have ethical compliance, which is in line with national guidelines, whether it's ethics to do research on animals or ethics to do research on human subjects, research misconduct. They have policies in place. What most institutions lack is a centralized management support system, which is pre-grant and post-grant. It is the researcher who will write the grant, but pre-award means finding out what are the funding opportunities, getting all the conditions for that. Post-award is managing the award once it has been made to a researcher. And as a result of these structures lacking, it is the researcher that has to do everything, and that can become rather demanding on time. And researchers also think that while doing all this, they can also do administration, and all of that contributes to less and less time that is given to research, and more time goes in planning these things, meetings, and so on. A researcher shouldn't just be on the lab bench or on the computer terminal doing research. It's very valuable for a researcher to have some free time where he or she can stare towards infinity and they just do nothing. That's very important. And unfortunately, our researchers today have no time to do nothing. They are running from one job to the other. And that is really causing a lot of problem in terms of the innovation that we see coming out. So there is also an opportunity in these challenges. And the opportunity is that institutions can develop research offices, and these research offices can provide employment to people who have a background in science, but who wish not to do, research anymore. They have the knowledge, and they can guide researchers. I mean, take a small example, a grant that is written by a researcher. And in biology especially, it's terrible because researchers think that everyone understands the jargon that they use. However, when their grants are read, they are read by people who may not necessarily be experts in that field. So they will look at this jargon in a rather negative way. Had there been somebody in the research office who had this capacity to tell the researcher, look, this is good, but this paragraph could have been worded like this. So this public outreach and this public communication of science is really something which is lacking in our researchers, that shows on grants and papers and all of that. So there is an opportunity also for employment for people who are trained in science but wish not to do science. I can tell from our own example, I mean, our office is populated, half our team is populated with PhDs who have post-PhD experience, have now decided to give up research, but form a research management structure. We have a public engagement officer that some of you may know, who has degrees from the best of places in the world. And after that, she decided, I'm not going to do research, I'm going to get into the public engagement of science. And I can tell you that for the last 3 years that she's been with us, we have done some amazing public outreach and some amazing work. So, you really need to use your talents properly, and some people really have a talent for this. What research offices will provide is an outlet for people with such talent. Sustainability, did I miss a slide?
Yeah, you missed a slide. You went one slide.
Yeah, okay. So we have 3 themes where we have learned through this. The first one is leadership, where research-centric institutions really would benefit from management. And we need to really strengthen diverse aspects of research management, which would involve maximizing government funding, corporate, private, and other sources. We really need to provide individual solutions which are aligned to research priorities instead of having a generic one for all. Institutional leadership has a key role to play in this. They are the ones who will set the mandate for a research office. Most institutional leaders will hide behind rules, and they will say, but the government has not given me a position of a research manager. The enlightened leaders would take a position from elsewhere and hire a research manager. And this is happening at institutions today. These are all government institutions. So if one government institution can do it, why can't others? And although we don't have quantitative data to show, and this is something we are gearing to get, I can assure you that having a research office makes a critical difference in the amount of funding that you can get. So I've actually asked the consultant who leads this to find before and after data for institutions that have research offices. How much funding they had from external sources before the research office and after. Sustainability is important. So therefore, institutional resources are needed to sustain this effort. You can't have researchers hire just lab managers on extramural grants who will look after the research management structure. Because most research grants in India are 3 years. And it becomes very difficult to sustain anything on that. Globally, grant overheads are used to support research officers. The problem in India is twofold. One is that institutional leadership does not want to get to leave that overhead for hiring research management people. And the second is the overheads are really low in India. The maximum overhead you will get is about 10% of direct cost. Universities in US can negotiate 75%, 80%, 50% overheads. And that they use this money very effectively. The third is about careers, and I've talked about this, that this offers an opportunity for people to develop career in a research manager track. And there are learning opportunities for people who are part of these networks. So really, as far as we can see, the next steps for this research management initiative is at multiple levels. For Government of India, we are working with them, trying to convince them that job creation at institutions, research manager jobs at institutions are critical. Unless that happens, sustainability won't come. Overheads need to be given a bit more generously, and program support policies should be in place. For the community, outreach and engagement is important. Engagement with institutional leadership on research management issues, volunteering opportunities, and we are working towards having the first conference of research managers in India sometime in the near future. As far as training opportunities are concerned, there are webinars available, there are thematic and regional workshops that we have done, that we are planning to do, and we of course have leadership workshops that we do for researchers. These are not for research managers, but for researchers. Internationally, we are becoming part of global exchange opportunities and programs. In the next year, we are also going to bring some international travel fellowships for research managers at institutions to go and learn at a center outside India. So some of these opportunities that we can build, we are building, but it needs more effort. So somebody asked me about the form. So you can go to this website and look at the research management initiative. You can download a Google form that you can fill and send us, and that will register your organization in this network. You will receive updates, and if you are interested, you can organize
Can applicant be an
workshops.
individual also? Can an individual also be an applicant?
Yes, you can. You can register through, this is a Google form which you fill and send it, and you will get registered. If you have any problem, you can also write to this email ID.
Is this being restricted right now only for biomedical research or across the board?
Because the problems are similar. Okay, so let me summarize. You are here for a program called LEAP, Leadership for Academicians program, right? Academics. So yeah, I've read through the document that MHRD put together for this program. Good effort, because it provides awareness and really coaching as well as networking opportunities amongst yourselves, which are very important. So my request to you is, after you go away from this 2-week course and the 1-week training in Singapore, you should remain friends, and you should talk to each other, and you should exchange ideas, and you should just expand your network. I think that's very important. This is one leadership model, but there are different leadership models, and one size does not fit all. That's for sure in this. Find the leadership style that fits you the best. That's important. different people approach leadership differently. But the one question that you must always ask is, what is going to be the outcome of or the consequences of my action? Is it going to improve learning opportunities for students at my institution? If you can do that, you are an academic leader. Leaders have clarity of thought, and if you have clarity of thought, you will communicate better. People who have confused minds don't communicate effectively either. So have clarity of thought. Communication also doesn't come naturally to people. To some people it does, but to most of us it doesn't. It requires coaching, it requires practice. So you must do that to be effective leaders. And most importantly, you must have the courage to take your ideas, your beliefs to their logical conclusion, not by force, but by intelligent and logical arguments. As a leader, you must think ahead of the curve, and thinking ahead of the curve, you must think about funding, you must think about the kind of people you need in your organization, not the kind of person you need today, but the kind of person you will need a few years later. And all that requires some broader thinking and vision. What are the challenges that your organization faces? And every challenge brings you an opportunity. So put all these together, think more broadly, and what is going to be very effective if you also read rather widely. Most people don't read as widely as they should be reading, and that's critical. Universities by themselves are complex organizations. A vice chancellor of a prominent university once told me that, running this university is like running a township. And that's true for most big campuses. So they are complex organizations, but it should be conversations and not dictates that should guide their governance. I've been talking about research development offices. These are important. The right people make a difference. Just having a research office will do nothing unless you have the right people in that office who have the right skill set to help researchers. And in the end, really, every action should be aimed at improving learning and the ecosystem around it. I believe that's my last slide. Thank you for being so patient.
I'll open for a few questions, because we also have to break for the tea and then we come back, so we can have more philosophical discussion after that. If there are quick questions, we can take up.
So is this concept similar to the grant writers in Melbourne or in Australia or UK? Any research grant proposal
Yes.
written by a PI is run through these professionals who are appointed generally by the university, and they give advice of improving the proposal.
Right.
Is it similar concept?
So those kind of people can be in research offices, but more than advising you on, or advising the researcher on the grant per se, research of managers should really be advising on whether the grant is written broadly enough for a broad audience. Also, beyond the core of the grant, which is the proposal with the aims and objectives, there are a lot of other columns to fill in most grants. CVs have to be put together, collaborators' letters have to be procured, ethics committee approvals have to, somebody needs to be there to put all these things.
Coordinating.
So there's much more to a grant than simply writing a proposal.
Is there any formal training for this?
Pardon me?
Is
Is there any formal training for research managers or any type of programs or degrees or any
So
type?
these associations, these research manager associations are having training programs. There are many online webinars and stuff like that. But if you're asking me whether there is a certificate course
Yeah.
or something, I am afraid no. At least not in India. Outside, yes, people do have such things. But in India, there's nothing. And it's much needed.
Much of the experience though.
Yeah, I mean, some people have a knack for it. Some have trained in environments where research management is done. Over the last couple of years, many people who have worked with us have gone to populate other places. ISER Pune, we have 2 of our research officers who are grant advisors who are now there, in their research office. Similarly, we have somebody in NCCS Pune, somebody who works for the Indo-German Center, somebody who works for the Science Office of the US Embassy. So, these people learn by doing things by experience, but there's no formal training as such.
Become the part of that particular organization or they belong to you, your organization, when they go to that place?
Part of what?
Part of that organization where they are supposed to be
Right.
working. So they are being the employee.
So
of
they are
that-
looking after the
just-
research manager functions in that organization. But we do use them as resource people for the workshops that we do. I mean, many of the people that you saw in the pictures, they are research managers at other institutions who work with us in delivering these workshops and talking about their experiences.
So you are recruiting people from your organizations to the other institutions, or they become part of the institution of their enrollment as far as the organization structure is concerned?
We take people from
Like
our
those
Yeah.
research officers working in institutions,
Ah.
are they in reputation from your office, from your organization?
No. So these are people who work with us. So like we have a team of 10 grant advisors.
Yeah.
2 years back, our grants manager found a research officer position at an institution in Pune, and he moved. So this is not by design. This happens. But the point is that this should happen by design.
The second question that by registering with the website, information about all the funding calls across the globe, they are going to come to the institutions or just only by your related funding?
So, I mean, what we are envisioning in the coming year is that we would put some money into this program beyond what we have put this year and create some fellowships and some travel bursaries where people could, go places, people could attend workshops to, improve their skill set. But, this is not going to be sustainable. Sustainability will come from institutions. And so therefore a large part of our effort is in convincing institutions that this is important. And convincing research funding agencies, government agencies, that they should be funding positions in institutions for research managers. Otherwise, directors say, do you expect me to take a scientist position and appoint a research manager? That's a common thing we hear.
Thank you. Now we break for tea, and please join me in thanking Dr. Shahid Jameel. The tea break is for about 20 minutes. After that, we'll come back here for our panel.
Okay, actually